Welcome to the No Budget Indie Filmcast, where we dip into the independent film universe to highlight those little films that you might not have heard about elsewhere. Will you agree with our panel, or will our panel agree with each other? Tune in to find out. I am Milo Dennison, and with me, as always, is Claire Milan.
Hello.
And Cathal Feeney.
Hello.
Okay, if you're watching us on YouTube, you might notice that we've all got John Hughes themed images behind us. That is because we watched a film called Don't You Forget About Me. It's a documentary about John Hughes. It's made
Although I thought it was actually about John Hume.
John
Hume. So John Hume is a guy in Northern Ireland, very involved in the peace process. So when Milo sent it to me, I thought it was a thing about Northern Ireland.
And so she didn't want to watch it then.
Yeah, so it's John Hughes. Sorry. So I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Sure.
Just to clear up any confusion that wasn't there.
Yeah, exactly. For no one, I'm sure nobody watching is like, oh, yeah. John Hume. Yeah, got it. Anyway, so this is a documentary by a group of film students. Basically, they started making a documentary about John Hughes and how much they love him and all this kind of stuff. And in the process, did quite a few interviews. They've interviewed people like Kevin Smith. They interviewed Judd Nelson, Kelly LeBrock, a lot of people that were involved in making John Hughes films, or people that just have a real affinity for his movies. And in the process of all this, they're like, well, we really should talk to the John Hughes himself. This was made in 2000 and I think between like 2006 and 2008 or something like that. It was made over a couple of years prior to John Hughes's death. And so anyway, at this time, this is when John had retired from filmmaking and basically didn't do interviews anymore. But they're like, okay, let's do a road trip to his house from Canada where they lived and actually go see if we can knock on his door and just tell him how much we love him, maybe get an interview with him, whatever. So it's that story, but mostly it's a story of people just telling what John Hughes films have meant to them and what they got out of them and what they appreciate about them and and with the actors, what it was like being involved in one of his films. So that's kind of it. It's a John Hughes love story documentary.
Do you know what's mad, right? I didn't know who John Hughes was.
How can you be in filmmaking and not know who John Hughes is?
I'm so silly. His name has been floating around.
But I've card seen now.
I know. I'm so. But I think there's a lot of people like me out there who these films, they're like a comfort, like planes, trains, automobiles. I watched that really recently again. I laughed out loud from start to finish. I don't do that nowadays. Do you know what I mean? And Home Alone, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Breakfast Club, all these films, I describe them as like, those films are kind of comfort films where you can watch them 100 times and you just know you'll just get this nostalgia, this kind of like hot chocolate, cocoa feeling, blankets by the fire. They're just classic films. I don't know how he was able to be so productive. They mentioned this in the documentary. But yeah, I really enjoyed documentary. It's like something like we would do. It's like us film buddies. Like we find a filmmaker we love and probably we're going to try to find where he lives. And you could tell like their love for this guy and how much they appreciate his films and how much of a mark he made. And he seems to be a bit of a recluse, John Hughes. I couldn't really find him. So I won't spoil it, don't worry. But and he passed away suddenly from a heart attack. He was in New York. And a lot of his films are based around Chicago. And I see one of the scenes in one, I'm not sure what film it is, but they're in the really high building in Chicago. And I was there 2 years ago. I was actually standing in that really high building, looking down. It was just brilliant. And even Home Alone, like I just could watch that film a million times. He's just brilliant. And just seeing the enthusiasm, the love for this filmmaker. And in parts though, I was a bit cringing. I was like, oh, he obviously doesn't want to be found, John Hughes. Do you know? And there's one part where the girl goes into his house and like they're kind of, there's only one girl and all the guys. And one guy's on crutches and she's the fall person to go into the house and drop a letter off. So I just thought, oh, it's, you could feel the cringe a little bit in that area because she's feeling it too.
Yeah. And you feel, because she seems like the only sane one out of the three of them, or the four of them. The rest are just like, let's mob his house. And she's like, don't act like lunatics if you want to actually possibly meet this guy. So,
like, I'd be her. Do you know what I mean? Like, Carl would probably be the guy in the crutches.
Very much. You know what I mean? He was the worst of them.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. Waving.
Oh, and I was like, please leave John Hughes to peace. I know he's passed away now, but when they were trying to find him, just like, oh, I hope they don't find him, because I just
anyway, that's Yeah, well, I was a bit like you, Terry. John Hughes, I had no idea, and then when I started watching it, and maybe at the deep recesses of my mind, I was going, oh, that John Hughes, but I couldn't be sure. I'm sure I heard his name at some stage. As it turns out, Ferris Bueller's Day Off is the only John Hughes film I've seen.
I've heard this one.
No.
How can we do a movie
I've seen Home Alone
podcast with you two?
Oh my God, Carl, you have to sit down and watch Planes, Trains, Automobiles this weekend.
And Breakfast Club.
You do. And the Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
And it's just, you will absolutely, this one anyway, you laugh out loud. You love it,
Okay, well, I'll put that on my to watch list. But as a documentary, since we're talking about the documentary, I think it sort of met the litmus test of a good documentary, in that if you didn't know much about the topic or the subject, it would keep you interested, and this did, because the way they sort of intercut the interviews with their road trip, and there were interesting people they interviewed. People who had, as Mara said, people who had worked with him, people who knew him, that film critic, Roger Ebert, I think. And you could see the affection that they had for him, and the love for him, and the appreciation of his genius, I suppose, the way he was able to sort of channel the teenager angst and voice of that time. So it was a very good. As for the kind of their end goal, or the whole motivation for doing it, as you said, I think the girl was the only real sane one. When they got to that point, and the guy with the curly hair on the crutches, like, at the beginning, he kind of looks sort of cool, I wonder what he's doing with him, and then he turned out to be the nerdiest of the lot of them. I said, that makes sense now. But overall, I thought it was good. It was well worth the hour or so of watching it.
Yeah. What's interesting about this film is they made it before he passed away, and they couldn't find distribution for it. And it wasn't until John Hughes passed away that they actually got a distribution for this documentary. So it's kind of sad that it took him dying in order for them to be able to actually sell this film.
What year was it made in?
Good artist,
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Was it 2006 it was made in, under?
Yeah, it might be right. Yeah, it was made a couple of years before. It was over a 2-year process, and it was made before he died. Yeah.
And also, what was good about it was the sort of the intrigue about it, that there was an end goal, and you wanted to know. You stayed with it. Will they, won't they? So that added an extra sort of air of
it was really sad. He got ripped to shreds by the critics in Hollywood, even though his films were absolutely beloved. And he said, he I don't know, he wrote Ferris Bueller's Day Off the first 50 pages when he's working on something else, and he wrote them overnight or something. But then the fact that it shows these critics rip him to shreds, and you can even though he's got films made, it must have been heartbreaking for him. The way I'd say he was maybe hypercritical, and that's why he kind of maybe moved away from Hollywood and back to Chicago. Maybe.
I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and he made a pretty good point that, he made 8 films that he wrote and directed, and then wrote all those other ones and produced and stuff like that. So he made plenty of money. And with that much output, you're just working constantly, and he had children and stuff like that. So the theory that this other guy said, which I kind of agree with, is that he probably just got to a point where it's like, you know what, I don't need the money. Don't want to do this anymore. I don't want the stress. I want to spend some time with my family, and it kind of makes sense. Like, that's not a bad way to go out. He went out on the top of his game. The fact that they've got these students that want to meet him and talk to him and want him to make films. Like when you watch this documentary, so many people were like, John Hughes, make us another film. Come on, man, make us another film. Like, he left at the top of his game. What not a great way to go,
Well, everything is just a theory, really. And it's impossible to know, because he did become such a recluse. And even the people that they interviewed, some of the actors who had no contact with him. I mean, that seemed really strange. You could sort of give up working and say, okay, I've had enough of this, but you think you'd still stay in contact with people.
But you know what maybe happened? He produced such brilliant films, he might have burnt out. Because sometimes that happens to people. If they do such brilliant work, sometimes they put everything into it. They just want to close that chapter in their life. And he's made his films, and he probably could have burnt out, maybe, because it would have taken a huge amount of energy to make these genius films. It's like, it's crazy to think. I'm just shocked. Like, he made all these absolute classics that you could watch 100 times over. I've never really seen that from a director ever.
Like what they could do is interview his children. Maybe they have an insight.
There you go. They had a few children in the documentary, or a few younger people in there.
Pardon?
They had a few younger people in the documentary.
No, but I mean his own children.
Oh, his children. Yeah. I could have tried to get an interview with his children to talk about him, but because I think one of the children's in the music business.
Oh.
I could be wrong on this, so I don't know fully what they do, but I think he had two children, and I think one of them is somehow involved in the entertainment business, but I could be completely wrong on that.
Yeah, it was a good idea for a film, and they did it well. They could have. Yeah,
especially because they're students. I mean, they couldn't have had a ton of money to spend on this film. So props for being new filmmakers and getting the interviews with the people they got interviews with. I mean, that's some quality.
I mean, I do wonder. I don't know. Was it clear in the film? How clear it was in the film? But how did they get access to those people? Did they just rock up and say, "Hey, we're a bunch of amateur filmmakers who want to talk about this guy," or is it out of sequence somehow? That were they added in after the fact?
Mm-hmm. Good question. So they filmed most of it. He passed away. They used that in order to get some more film people in there.
That's interesting, actually.
I don't know. Yeah. My theory is just somebody in that group is really good at getting in touch with celebrities and was able to get the interviews. That's my theory.
Because some of these celebrities, all you have to do is ask their agents.
Sometimes.
They're probably very willing. Do you know, some of them are very willing to just, because they're people.
Maybe they were the first people to ever do it, to think about it. Like, let's make a documentary about John Hughes. And from the point of view of fans, young people, not just some sort of documentary crew from a big corporation. Actually, I listened to an interview with David Putnam on the radio there during the week, and he's getting Irish citizenship now. He lives down in Cork. He's like sort of a patron of the Bastna Film Festival. But he talked about when he was younger, himself and his friend, they made a few films, and they weren't usually successful at the time. And the rights for this book came up by Albert Speer, and he was a sort of an architect who worked with the Nazis. Like, he was Hitler's favorite architect, and he was imprisoned after the war in Spandau, and he got out anyway. And they went to pitch their idea for the book that he had written to make it into a film, and in the end he agreed that they could do it, because he said it's a film that needs to be made by young people. So maybe it's similar here, like that. As young people, they got the access that other people might have.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, maybe just their enthusiasm and the fact their youth worked for them.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's rate it then. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. If I want, I don't know. Ladies first, if you want, Claire. I don't mind.
Oh, go on.
As a documentary, I thought it was good. As I said, it's sort of, I didn't flag at all during the course of the hour or so. And I sort of knew a little bit about him, but I feel as if I know more about him now, and I'm more interested in seeing more of his back catalogue. So I would give it 4 stars.
Yeah, and for me, luckily, it wasn't John. Well, luckily, it wasn't. It was fun to watch. It wasn't about Northern Ireland. Right? Sorry, I love Northern Ireland. I love history. But I just, it was just great to see a film about John Hughes. And I didn't realize all these amazing films I'd known were part of John Hughes made them. It was a really interesting documentary. The enthusiasm came across really well. And I have a whole list of films I have to check out now. I made a list of them, including 16 Candles, which looks really good, and The Breakfast Club, which I haven't checked out yet. So for me, I'll give it 4 stars.
All right. I don't like the fact that this is now 2 reviews in a row where we're going with the same rating. I prefer it when we disagree, but I guess it's a good thing that we do agree, because that means we all like stuff that is good. And in this case, I'm going 4 stars as well with this for similar reasons as you guys. I am a John Hughes fan. I've seen every film he's directed, and quite a few films that he's written, and am just a fan of his stuff. So 4 stars. Well, No Budget Filmcast audience, let us know what you think of Don't You Forget About Me. You can reach out to us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at No Budget Show, or leave a comment in the notes. And with that, we'll say see you next time, and goodbye.
Bye.
I like how we spent most of that time talking about John Hughes versus the documentary about John Hughes.
And even our background had nothing to do with the documentary.
It's the enthusiasm, though. It's enthusiasm they gave us to look into things.